Hey, what's up? It's Jake from Nimbus DevOps, and we're now going to talk on section 1.11 on guidelines for writing good code. So, before we get started, it's good for us to talk about what good code might look like and give you a reference for where to find some tips on writing good code straight from the source. So, we'll do that. It's not really as easy as you might think. In fact, writing good quote unquote code is actually kind of an art. Um, there's a lot of qualities that would describe good code, and they're very difficult to all kind of bring together into one place. But regardless if you're a beginner or you're advanced, I would say honestly the target audience for this particular material is probably somebody who's been through a Python course. They remember the Hello World stuff, but they don't really remember anything after that, but they are familiar with some stuff and maybe they wrote a script or two, or you do a little bit of Python stuff at work, but you don't really consider yourself like a developer, or you wouldn't say that you can code really well. And so I think that would be a good place to start. But regardless of wherever you're starting, there is a resource that I recommend, and that's peps.python.org. So these are the Python enhancement proposals, and they just describe newly proposed features in Python and our way to kind of document processes around the guidelines of coding with Python. And you can find this index has literally everything about it. And so I think for style and informational things like that, when you get into really niche cases, you can find some good stuff on here about pretty much anything. Um, but this is PEP's 0. Where's PEP 8? Yeah, here we go. Style guide for Python code. So PEP 8 is probably the most famous of all the PEPs, and it lays out a pretty simple and effective way of describing a set of guidelines defined by Python aesthetics so that you can write elegant code. Even if you just take one thing from section 1 of all these videos that I've made, following this is probably the best advice I could give you. Um, it's kind of like a social thing now with code, and so you can't just like go to work, do your code, leave, and then ignore everyone. Like it's a social thing in that other people read your code, they reuse your code, the company uses your code, and it's just a communication medium, really. And other people will judge you for it. You will be promoted and hired based on your style. And when you're going through all these exercises, I highly recommend that you upload these to your own GitHub repository so people can look at your code style, because your GitHub repo is a place for you to kind of have a portfolio of projects you've worked on, and people can get an idea of what your programming style is and whether or not you use some of these things. And having taken advantage of using PEP 8 will be huge for you in cleaning up your code and having some standard. And if other people are following these standards, which they should, then you have a lot of the same types of approaches to doing to solving problems and to structuring your code, which will make it very easy to communicate with others. It's just it's just the way of the world, really. So consistency is key, right? Some people and even some companies abide by this like strictly, and some people just don't really care. They don't follow anything. So, but I will tell you that even if you don't work somewhere that uses it, there's a huge advantage to using that, and that's that if you read it yourself, or if you write it yourself, it's easy to read. And if you do it that way every time, you know where to find things. Even if you haven't read something that you wrote 5 or 6 months ago, you can go back to it, and if it's structured the same way, if it's written the same way, it's easy to read and kind of infer what your intention was with something, especially when you go to troubleshoot a bug or something like that. Um, but trying to interpret every single person's style is so hard, and so if you can get people to use something like PEP 8, it would definitely help get everybody on the same page and make reading and interpreting everybody else's code a lot easier and less time consuming. So I will try to respect this as much as I can. If you find something that I do from this point forward, because I'm really going to start using real code examples now, and you have recommendations, let me know. Let me know. I'm not perfect. I don't, like I said, I don't have all this memorized, and I try to follow it, but I don't do a good job of it sometimes, maybe. Um, but you could even use this as a way of testing code. You should have these things in your tests before you deploy things out into the real world where it's used. So things like maximum line length or indentation, blank spaces, um, just stuff like that. There's little things you can do, and you can check all the code for these things before it gets pushed out anywhere. And you yourself can build little tests to do that so that you don't get embarrassed and be like, oh, I can't believe I missed that. It's like, oh, you should automate testing of your code so you can just test it and then it'll be like, boom, this, like a spell checker for programmers, right? Um, you wouldn't submit a high school or college writing assignment without spell checking. You wouldn't send an email to a massive amount of people at work or somebody really important without spell checking it. So you shouldn't do that with your code either, especially since it literally keeps some of the lights on in some companies. So anyways, that's where I am on the style stuff. So really, just in summary, PEP 8. You can go to peps.python.org and find PEP 8, or just type /pep-0008 and go check it out for yourself and let me know what you think.